In the heart of West Africa, one nation just shocked the world by revealing a game-changing military technology. How did a country known for political instability and poverty produce a drone that sent shockwaves through Western defense powers? Have you ever wondered what happens when a nation stops relying on foreign powers for its defense? How does a small country, against all odds, disrupt the global military balance? Imagine the ripple effect when a nation finally takes its security into its own hands, refusing to remain dependent on the traditional global powers for its defense capabilities. What happens when a country takes control of its own defense technology, shifting the global power dynamic? A country long seen as fragile and underdeveloped reveals a cutting-edge military weapon that redefines its place on the global stage. Burkina Faso, a country that has struggled with insurgency, poverty, and political instability, now stands poised to reshape the security dynamics of an entire region. This revelation is not just about a drone. It's about sovereignty, innovation, and defying the expectations of a global community. In the next few minutes, we'll explore how Burkina Faso's shocking drone revelation is changing the course of history, challenging long-standing power structures, and marking the beginning of a new chapter in African defense capabilities. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more incredible stories of global politics. In 2024, Burkina Faso was in turmoil, plagued by terrorism, political instability, and a history of weak leadership. The country was caught in the grip of insurgencies and armed groups that destabilized much of the Sahel region. Burkina Faso, once seen as a beacon of democracy in West Africa, had fallen victim to multiple coups, with ineffective leadership unable to address the growing security threats. Enter Ibrahim Traoré, a young military strategist whose rise to power would mark a turning point in the nation's trajectory. Traoré's ascent was not just a political shift, it was a dramatic break from the past. As a military officer with a deep understanding of modern warfare, he was determined to pull Burkina Faso out of its cycle of corruption, economic struggle, and foreign dependency. With a background in military strategy, he was acutely aware of the need for technological innovation, particularly in defense, to secure his country's future. His vision for Burkina Faso was clear: independence, modernization, and sovereignty. Unlike many leaders who rely heavily on foreign intervention to secure their nations, Traoré saw an opportunity for Burkina Faso to break free from this reliance. He knew that true sovereignty didn't come from external military aid, it came from within. He pushed for the development of indigenous military technologies, seeing it as crucial for the country's security. In the early months of his leadership, he made it clear that Burkina Faso's future lay in self-reliance, especially when it came to defense capabilities. His approach to modernizing the military was revolutionary, combining cutting-edge technology with traditional strategies to give Burkina Faso a strong and independent military force. Beyond military reform, Traoré focused on the rebuilding of the nation's fractured infrastructure. The roads, hospitals, and schools had all been neglected for far too long. He recognized that to stabilize the country, he would need to restore the infrastructure and boost the morale of the people, including the armed forces. He emphasized that Burkina Faso could stand strong on its own, without relying on others for support. His leadership became a symbol of hope for many, a promise that the country could regain its dignity and sovereignty. What do you think of Traoré's vision for his country? Comment below and let's discuss. 4 months, a small group of Burkinabe engineers, military officers, and technology specialists worked in secrecy, tucked away from the prying eyes of the international community. With limited resources but boundless determination, they embarked on a covert mission to develop a drone capable of surveillance, reconnaissance, and strategic defense. The project, initiated by Ibrahim Traoré, was a reflection of his belief that true sovereignty could only be achieved through self-reliance in all aspects, including military technology. The team, composed of Burkinabe scientists and engineers who were passionate about changing the country's trajectory, worked tirelessly to overcome the challenges they faced. There were no foreign experts involved, no international contractors, and no external funding. Everything was done in-house. Despite the dire economic circumstances in the country, the government's investment in this project was unwavering, with Traoré seeing it as the key to securing Burkina Faso's future. It wasn't just about creating a piece of technology, it was about reshaping the country's identity and asserting its independence on the global stage. Despite the severe economic challenges Burkina Faso faced, Traoré understood that investing in cutting-edge military technology was the path to reducing the country's dependence on foreign arms suppliers. Burkina Faso had been at the mercy of Western nations for its military needs, but Traoré was determined to change that. He saw an opportunity to shift the power dynamic in West Africa by building a military force that could stand on its own. The government allocated substantial funds to the project, making it a priority for the nation's future. Traoré understood that by creating indigenous technology, Burkina Faso could break free from the shackles of foreign dependency. Not only would the country have the ability to defend itself, but it could also play a more significant role in regional security, further solidifying its independence. The drone project, despite the country's financial constraints, was a symbol of hope for a brighter, more autonomous future for Burkina Faso. The Made in Burkina drone was more than just a piece of military hardware. It represented a leap in technological prowess and self-reliance. This UAV was designed for high-altitude surveillance, capable of gathering critical intelligence over vast areas. It was equipped with state-of-the-art sensors that allowed it to track enemy movements, providing real-time data to military commanders. The drone's surveillance capabilities made it an invaluable tool for monitoring terrorist activity and insurgent movements in and around Burkina Faso's borders. What set the drone apart, however, was its ability to carry out precise strikes. Although it wasn't as advanced as some of the high-tech drones used by major military powers, it was more than capable of striking strategic targets with remarkable accuracy. The drone's dual-use capability, both reconnaissance and offensive strikes, was an impressive feat for a nation with limited resources, showing the ingenuity and determination of Burkinabe engineers and military personnel. The unveiling of the Made in Burkina drone was a carefully orchestrated event, broadcast live to the world. As the sleek black UAV sat proudly on the stage beside Ibrahim Traoré, the audience was filled with a sense of awe and disbelief. Many had questioned whether Burkina Faso could ever produce such advanced technology, but here it was, in front of the world. Traoré, with a mixture of pride and defiance, addressed the global audience. "This is not just a symbol of our military strength," he declared, "it is a testament to our sovereignty. We are no longer dependent on foreign powers. Burkina Faso now has the ability to defend itself on its own terms." The words echoed around the world, leaving the Western powers who had long dominated Africa's defense markets, scrambling to assess the implications of this game-changing development. For Burkina Faso, this was a defining moment, one that would reshape its future and mark the country as a force to be reckoned with on the global stage. What do you think of Burkina Faso's technological breakthrough? Could this shift the global balance of power? Share your thoughts in the comments. When the news broke about Burkina Faso's Made in Burkina drone, the Western world was stunned. Nations that had long been the arms suppliers to African countries suddenly found themselves questioning how a country facing political turmoil and insurgencies could outpace them in military innovation. How could Burkina Faso, a nation struggling with internal strife and a fragile economy, have developed a military technology capable of rivaling that of major global powers? This question dominated discussions in Western military and political circles. Burkina Faso had always been considered a peripheral player in the global defense market, dependent on foreign powers for its military equipment and security needs. However, with the unveiling of the drone, the country demonstrated that even the most resource-strapped nations could innovate and produce cutting-edge military technology. This not only shocked Western powers but also forced them to reassess their understanding of African nations' potential in the defense sector. The unveiling of the drone signaled a shift in the regional power dynamics, and Western governments quickly realized that their influence over the region might no longer be as secure as it once was. France, with its long-standing historical and military ties to Burkina Faso and other West African nations, reacted with deep concern. For decades, France had been the dominant military power in the region, often providing arms, training, and intelligence to African nations in exchange for political and economic influence. The success of Burkina Faso's indigenous drone program posed a direct challenge to France's interest in the region, particularly regarding control over resources and strategic military positioning. French defense officials expressed their unease publicly, questioning how Burkina Faso had managed to achieve this technological breakthrough without relying on French or other Western defense contractors. The development of the drone was seen as a clear indication that Burkina Faso was no longer willing to accept the status quo. As a former colonial power, France had long viewed West Africa as its sphere of influence. The rise of an African nation capable of developing its own military technology was seen as a significant blow to France's authority in the region. The French military began reassessing its presence in the Sahel, realizing that it could no longer operate with the same degree of dominance. In Washington, the reaction was more measured but equally concerned. The United States, along with other Western powers, had long considered Africa a region where their influence and security operations could be easily maintained. However, the revelation of Burkina Faso's drone program threw a wrench into these assumptions. Defense analysts in Washington quickly began to evaluate the broader implications of Burkina Faso's technological advancement. A country with limited access to the global defense market had managed to create a military asset that could disrupt the balance of power in the Sahel and beyond. Washington viewed this as a shift in the regional dynamics, especially in light of growing instability in neighboring countries like Mali and Niger. More importantly, the drone's capabilities raised questions about the effectiveness of the Western-led sanctions and their ability to control the flow of military technology to African nations. Analysts feared that this development could signal the beginning of an arms race in Africa, where nations once reliant on Western powers could now look to develop their own indigenous technologies. The United States, along with its allies, began rethinking their approach to military aid and engagement in Africa, knowing that the landscape had fundamentally changed. Do you think Burkina Faso's success is a threat to Western powers? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Burkina Faso's success with the Made in Burkina drone sent shockwaves across West Africa, a region that had long been reliant on foreign military aid and support. For years, countries like Mali, Niger, and Chad had struggled with insurgency, instability, and the challenge of building their own military strength. They depended on external powers, especially France and the United States, for training, equipment, and financial assistance. However, Burkina Faso's achievement proved that even nations with limited resources could rise above the constraints imposed by their economic and political challenges. As the news spread, these nations began to reassess their own military capacities. If Burkina Faso could develop its own military technology, what was stopping them from doing the same? Mali, Niger, and Chad, countries facing similar insurgent threats and political instability, started to look inward, considering the possibility of building their own defense industries. Burkina Faso's success had set a powerful example for the region. Independence and sovereignty weren't just about military victories on the battlefield, but about controlling the technology needed to secure their nations. In an environment where foreign military aid was no longer a guarantee and where reliance on external powers had often led to exploitation, Burkina Faso had shown that self-reliance was possible. Its military innovation could spark a wave of similar efforts across West Africa, potentially changing the strategic and security landscape of the region. Other countries began to see the potential benefits of investing in their own technological capabilities, which would reduce reliance on foreign powers and shift the power balance in their favor. Burkina Faso had become a beacon of technological self-reliance for other African nations. For the first time, an African nation had demonstrated that it could develop military technology without outside assistance, challenging the long-standing narrative that Africa needed to rely on Western powers for its defense. This shift in mindset was crucial for Africa's long-term security and sovereignty. Burkina Faso's drone not only represented military strength but also a sense of pride, and its success sent a powerful message across the continent. Africa was capable of more than just receiving aid. It could innovate, build, and defend itself. This success had ripple effects across the African continent. Countries that had long been dependent on foreign defense technologies and training programs began to explore the possibility of developing their own military infrastructure. Nations such as Nigeria, South Africa, and Kenya, with stronger economies and regional influence, started to see the value in investing in indigenous defense technologies. The idea of developing homegrown capabilities became increasingly appealing, and countries began looking at ways to foster innovation in military research and development. The wave of self-reliance inspired by Burkina Faso's drone also created space for greater regional cooperation. African countries, once divided and reliant on external support, began to explore partnerships that could lead to the development of common defense strategies and technologies. This cooperation would allow nations to share knowledge and resources, reducing their collective dependence on external powers and improving security throughout the region. The success of Burkina Faso's drone program did not just have implications for Africa. It also marked a shift in the global arms market. For decades, the arms industry had been dominated by the United States, Russia, and European countries, which had long supplied weapons and military technologies to Africa. However, Burkina Faso's indigenous innovation proved that smaller, resource-strapped nations could develop and produce their own military technology, reducing their reliance on foreign suppliers. This shift could have serious implications for the traditional global defense landscape. As African nations increasingly look inward for their defense solutions, the established powers in the global arms trade may face growing competition. The potential for an African-led arms industry, driven by self-reliance and indigenous development, could challenge the status quo and offer African nations an opportunity to control their own military futures. Additionally, the growing interest in military innovation across the African continent could attract new players into the global arms market. As more African nations seek to develop advanced defense technologies, countries that specialize in manufacturing military hardware may find themselves vying for contracts and partnerships with African nations, reshaping the market and opening new avenues for trade and collaboration. For Western arms suppliers, this presents a challenge. How will they respond to this shift? Can they continue to dominate the global arms market, or will they need to adapt to the growing demand for indigenous military solutions from Africa? The impact of Burkina Faso's drone may be just the beginning of a much larger shift in the balance of power in the global defense industry. Ibrahim Traoré's leadership has already begun to change the course of history. His bold decision to pursue technological independence for Burkina Faso has not only strengthened the country's military capabilities but also established a new narrative for African nations. No longer do they have to depend on foreign powers for defense technology. With the success of the Made in Burkina drone, Burkina Faso has shown that, even under the harshest conditions, it is possible for nations to innovate and create solutions on their own terms. Traoré's vision of a sovereign, self-reliant nation has been realized in the form of this revolutionary military technology, symbolizing his leadership and the determination of the Burkinabe people to chart their own future. This story goes beyond the success of Burkina Faso's drone program. It serves as a broader reminder of how the global power dynamics are shifting. The future of power doesn't solely lie in the hands of traditional superpowers, but in the rise of nations that are willing to take matters into their own hands. Burkina Faso's leap into military innovation is just the beginning. Other countries, particularly across Africa, will be watching closely, inspired by what's possible when nations choose to rely on their own ingenuity rather than foreign influence. This could spark a wave of innovation across the continent, reshaping how countries defend themselves and assert their sovereignty. The implications of this shift are profound, not just for Burkina Faso, but for the future of global politics and military strategy. If you found this story inspiring, don't forget to hit the like button, share, and subscribe for more political insights.